And it's 2 years ago that Russian troops were pushed back from the Kharkiv region of eastern Ukraine. Fierce fighting, though, has resumed along a large part of the border. Russia says it has now captured another 4 villages in the region, taking the total to 9 since it launched a surprise offensive 3 days ago. Well, our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale has been spending time on the front line to see the devastation there for himself.
This devastation, one man's house, was created by a Russian glide bomb. And that's the sound of a jet somewhere.
Well, the assault in Kharkiv comes as Vladimir Putin removes his defence secretary, who had been in position for 12 years. Let's get more on this now from our Russia editor, Steve Rosenbberg, who is here in the studio with us this morning. Morning, Steve. So,
good morning to you.
Does this reshuffle come as something of a surprise?
To an extent, but there had been rumours that Sergei Shoigu could be removed. I mean, one of his deputies was arrested recently on corruption charges. But, you know, the world of Kremlin politics is Machiavellian. It's very difficult to know what's going on, what this all means. It's a bit like trying to do a 1,000-piece jigsaw when you've got half the pieces missing. Some people think that the replacement of the defence minister reflects battles between Kremlin clans. Other people think it's a way President Putin is trying to boost efficiency in the armed forces, because the new defence minister is a technocrat, an economist, Andrei Belousov, and that kind of makes sense, bringing in an economist to run the defence ministry when you consider how much money the Russian authorities are pouring into the war in Ukraine at the moment. I mean, defence spending has been ratcheted up, and if the Russian economy isn't on a war footing at the moment, it's certainly taken a big step towards being on a war footing, I think.
So what do you think this personnel change of defence secretary, what does it tell us about what Putin thinks is going on in Ukraine, how he's doing?
I think it shows that he thinks this is going to take a long time, right? The Russians, as I say, are spending more money on the war. I think the feeling in the Kremlin is that they're in this for the long haul, and that they need someone in the defence ministry who understands the economy, who understands finances, who can make sure that the Russian authorities, the Russian army, gets all the supplies it needs, hardware, everything for the troops, etc.
Am I right in saying he's got no military experience himself?
Yeah, but the thing is that if you go back over the last 30 years of modern Russian history, defence ministers tend to be civilians, actually, in the main. And, you know, he will be in charge of organising logistics and things like that. The war, the battles, that's organised by the general staff.
The suspicion, of course, will be it doesn't really matter who's in a post like Defence Secretary, because at the end of the day, it's Vladimir Putin himself who'll make the big decisions.
Well, that's true, John. I mean, you know, in a sense, it doesn't matter who's sitting around the cabinet table. There is one man in Russia who decides all the major things, and that is Vladimir Putin. He's the man with all the power. The political system in Russia is built around one man, and that's Vladimir Putin.
And we talk about the conflict a lot here, don't we, on BBC News. How is it being reported in Russia?
Very differently, right? If you switch on Russian state television from morning till night, everything that's happening is being presented completely differently, as if Russia is the victim here and the West is the aggressor. So you will have hosts on TV shows saying that the West actually attacked Russia and is waging war against Russia, using Ukraine to do that. In a sense, living in Russia right now, it's a bit like living in a mixture of Orwell's 1984, Alice Through the Looking Glass. It's a strange parallel reality, if you like.
It's lovely to have you here with us in the studio this morning. Normally when we talk to you, it's down the line and you're in front of St Basil Cathedral and we see the Kremlin behind
St
you.
Basil's?
Yeah, well,
yeah, not here.
Yeah. But I think we often wonder when we're talking to you about any story coming out of Russia, about the kind of the challenges you face in telling the story for the BBC and internationally, while at the same time living, working under restrictions, getting in Russia.
Yeah, it's a challenging job, for sure. It's a bit like walking a tightrope over a minefield, really. when you're reporting, and you don't know at what point you might fall off the tightrope, and if you do, whether you'll land on a mine. So I just try and do my job and try and tell the story as I see it, as clearly as I can. But it's working in Russia as a reporter, as a correspondent. It's very different now from what it was 10 years ago, for sure.
How's it changed in terms of day-to-day?
Just the fact that, the authorities make it pretty clear that they view us as the enemy. The authorities divide countries into friendly countries and unfriendly countries. That's the label. And Britain is considered to be an unfriendly country. On the other hand, we're still invited to Kremlin events. So we were invited to the inauguration ceremony of Vladimir Putin. We were invited to the Victory Day parade a few days ago on Red Square. And we're still able at these events to talk to players, quite senior people, which is quite interesting. So, we try and make the most of that to hear what they're thinking and to try and, fill in some of these jigsaw pieces to try and piece together what's actually happening, what people there are thinking.
The level of diplomacy as a journalist must be off the charts. You must have to be incredibly aware of your behaviour, what you say, your movements.
You've got to be diplomatic, but also you've got to say what you think. And, I've lived in Russia a long time, right? Nearly 30 years. And there's a lot I like about the country. And I would hope that, the authorities understand that, The country's changed hugely, and I still struggle to work out how on earth this massive country, right, the biggest country in the world, could have taken such a different path, a dark path, 2 years ago when it launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And, when we talk to Russians, we go on trips and talk to people, I'm still trying to answer that question, how a country that I fell in love with many years ago when I started learning Russian has taken that very different path.
And where it goes next as well. You're there watching it up close, yeah.
Yeah. In a sense, it feels like you're actually inside a history book, And my job is kind of to chronicle as best I can, as honestly as I can, what is happening now. But what is going to happen and when it's going to happen, I don't know.
Steve Rosenbberg, BBC's Russia editor. Fascinating to have a chat with you, and thank you for coming in and talking about today's story as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.